Welcome to this quantum security and defense presentation, elevating post-quantum data security and compliance management. And thank you for being a valued member of our community. Former Royal Marine and seasoned cybersecurity architect, Mark brings a deep understanding of regulated markets, cryptographic assurance, and compliance frameworks. With a background spanning executive leadership, pre-sales, and technical strategy, he excels in translating complex security challenges into actionable, revenue-driven solutions. Now leading partner GTM at Venari Security, Mark's expertise bridges the gap between cutting-edge security technologies and enterprise adoption.
Thanks, Anna, and good afternoon, everybody. It's an absolute pleasure to be here today. A very exciting day as well, because there's not many opportunities that present themselves during your career that really mark such a significant milestone as what's happening here. And although we're two relatively new companies, we're actually really moving some big things to make that happen for you. So very specifically, I appreciate the opportunity to be here at QSecDef today, where we challenge the assumptions and push the boundaries of cryptographic security. My name's Mark Slater, and I'm the Director of Channels here at Venari, and I'm joined today by my colleague Simon, who's the brains of the outfit. And I like to think there's a trend of boldness that goes with the brains, but that's. I think there's a very much biased.
I'm going to
Anna's not
protest.
agreeing. Yeah, no problem.
Very much a bias towards Simon there. So, what we wanted to do today really is pick up on our announcement. So we've been working fervently in the background since you last heard from CryptoCyber a couple of weeks back, and we've now formally announced today, you may have seen on the wire already, if not after the call you'll be able to see it, a partnership between us two, bringing our technologies together. But it's significantly more than that, which we'll cover off during the course of this. So we've got a trend here, what we're calling bridging the gap. So we're bridging the gap between encryption compliancy and complexity, business needs and regulatory compliance. And we're putting that all into one platform. So you no longer have to go away and scrape around and try and figure out from many tools what's going on. This partnership enables us to have a single platform, and that's really a key point of us coming together here, that does it all, offering real-time cryptographic visibility, regulatory compliance, seamless business interpretation, without adding complexities into the security operation. So very specifically, we're going to talk about how we do this and why that's very different to the way that's been done in the past. But it's more than just a technology merger. This is more than just a bringing together of tech. It's a true business partnership. We're joining all of our resources together to ensure that our combined expertise in encryption and security, compliance, cryptographic visibility, delivers maximum value for you in a one-stop place. Our sales and marketing teams are unified and are amplifying awareness and of adoption across our customers and partner base. Our engineering teams are consolidating, focusing on a common unified outcome, delivering cryptographic assurance at scale for you, bringing together all of our technologies, our passive sensors, as well as our UIs, and also the remediation elements that you heard about from CryptoCyber a couple of weeks ago.
Mark, do you want to go to the next slide? You're still on
Oh, yeah, sorry.
No problem. There you go.
There we go. So why are we doing this? It's the market opportunity is really now. We're right at the start line of what's going on. So let's put that into some perspective and put some business numbers around that for you. The global post-quantum cryptography market is forecast to grow from 551 million in last year to 17.7 billion by 2034, 10 years time. So that's a CAGR of 41%. That's pretty impressive, and certainly something that we are very much focused on contributing to. Why? Because every organization out there, whether you're regulated or not, needs to secure encrypted data now and prepare for PQC. This is an option because
it's a same list. Pretty much all these four cover.
Go on mute, please. Thank you. This isn't an option. Cybersecurity has evolved from an isolated technical concern to a business critical function now. And everything we do it is directly impacted by it. Revenues, operational resilience, as well as compliance. But there is a problem here. Encryption's complicated. And from that perspective, most organizations struggle with the simplest questions of what encryptions do we use today? Is it compliant? And is it secure? These are pretty simple business questions, but in the world of cryptography, they're quite problematic to answer with the legacy tool sets that we've got. And this is where Venari and cryptocurrency really bridge the gap. We remove that complexity through our technologies. So we secure, so security teams, compliance leaders and executives can understand and act without the need to decode cryptographic jargon that the tooling is typically given in the past. So what does that actually look like in real terms? So what we've got here is, it isn't about stopping threats as a headline. That's one part of what we need to do. It's about the business enablement that encryption enables, and at the heart of what we need to do, that's exactly where encryption sits. Regulators like PCI, DSS 421, DORA, GDPR mandate best encryption practices, not as a suggestion, but as a requirement. Whether you're in finance, healthcare, or any other industry handling sensitive data, these standards set a baseline for what's safe and what's acceptable. But compliance is not the end goal. True cryptographic assurance ensures that security and compliance support business growth rather than slow it down or even compromise it. Venari Security and cryptocurrency make it possible by delivering encryption security as a business tool, transforming compliance obligations into a competitive advantage. So moving on to our next slide. Oh, wrong way. What we're going to do is unpick this a little bit for you, because this isn't a simple conundrum of just running one little protocol and hey presto, everything's working. It's actually a complex mix of multiple things. So together, Venari and cryptocurrency eliminate these blind spots in the encryption security. We answer two fundamental questions. What encryption is actually being used on your network right now? Not what's configured, but what's happening in real terms on the wire. And secondly, how does this impact your business financially, operationally, and compliance and regulation? This means you don't just get to see raw data, you get to see clear business intelligence through our platform that helps you make faster, smarter security decisions. So it's one platform, passive real-time monitoring, ensuring continuous assurance, compliance and security in one place, eliminating audit and guesswork. Well, it doesn't eliminate audit, it enables a much simpler audit. Business first insights. So every stakeholder from the security teams to the boardroom get the metrics in a language and a form they understand and can use in real time. This is not just encryption monitoring. This is encryption assurance built for the business as well as the security team. Simon, can you just jump in and give us add a bit more colour to what goes on there?
So anyone who's had any experience in large enterprise in IT will know that visibility is often a distant goal. Visibility of everything that's going on, the assets, the patching level, the status of everything. You know, if you ask a CISO how many Windows servers they have, I mean, I've asked this question and had this answer before. I have between 20 and 24,000 servers. That means there's 4,000 servers that are not patched, that are not part of the, you know, assurance life cycle around compliance and regulations and security. It's even worse, it seems, with encryption. You know, cryptography by its very nature is opaque, right? That's the intention, and it seems its use in enterprises is equally opaque, in that people really don't understand what's going on in their environments. Generally, the thought of us, and maybe not so much among this group, but the little padlock, that means everything's okay, isn't it? But it isn't, and we've seen some really interesting and not entirely unexpected results in our corporate partners, dev partners, and customers, which we'll probably cover in a couple of slides' time to give you some real examples. But I think the other point I would make, and I'm sure we all understand this, is, you know, cryptography, encryption. It's a very deep subject. It's very esoteric, and people are not up to speed in a way that allows them to appropriately understand status and how it's being used. So we're really trying to shine a light on this, but not only offer discovery and visibility, but also routes to remediation, recommendations in terms of priorities of actions, what actions to take, and so on. Because let's not forget, this race to PQC, you know, it started a while ago. It doesn't start later. And, you know, we all need to get our houses in order to understand what needs to be done to ensure that we are cryptographically compliant with newer regulations, which are more and more becoming explicit about things like cybers and so on. In the old days, it was strong encryption was the phrase, but now that's being underlined by more specifics. So as you know, in this changing regulatory world, with all of the different points on this slide around different user groups, different ways of accessing corporate information and data, we need to have a wide mechanism and set of capabilities to allow us to understand exactly what's going on. And I've probably said enough there. So please, back to you, Mark.
Yeah, thanks, Simon. Yeah, so that actually leads quite nicely into our next slide, which
that was my intention.
which is this one here, which you would have seen a couple of weeks ago from Crypto Cyber. However, it very much allows us to unify a key. It's a key stepping stone that unifies the essence of the partnership. Together we cover all of these 5 buckets extremely well, and ultimately it's these 5 buckets that are critical to you. So bringing true crypto assurance requires these 5 fundamental pillars: discovery, identification of all TLS certificates and ciphers in use; the business impact reduces audit failures, ensures regulatory confidence; monitor, continuously observe cryptographic traffic in real time. Business impact there is prevents misconfigurations and reduces downtime. In addition to that, it also gives you full assured compliance. Compliance is what's happening on the wire, not what sits in the policy or what could be construed as a configuration on a server. It's also the evidence if you ever have the misfortune to have a breach, and that's not an if, that's a when, because we'll all get breached at some point. It provides you the monitoring provides you the evidence that you would need to present to represent yourself in front of a court if you ever had to go down that path as well. So monitoring is really critical. Assess is really to determine the compliance and business risk exposure. You know, what is the gap between your configuration, what's happening on the wire, and the policy that you've committed to implement to keep your data safe. So assessment is critical here. and an assessment is the inclusion of audit, compliance, and assurance all coming together as one. Remediation then is the fix weaknesses, align encryption policies, and that really is the point where you can avoid fines, legal exposure, and service descriptions. So, and then future proofing is the insurance, is the perpetual monitoring, the long-term transition to PQC, the implementation of new standards as they come along, and the compliance of that on the wire, as well in real time, as well as compliance to the audits. And we'll talk a little bit more about audit in a minute, because there's a big difference between audit and compliance and assurance. They are three very different things, but they must work harmoniously together. Simon, is there anything you'd like to add to that one? You're on mute.
Sorry, I'm the CTO. You wouldn't believe it, would you? Thank you, Mark. Let me add a couple of comments here just to add a bit more colour. I think the challenge for many organisations at the moment is really in step one, is the identification, is what actually are we using right now? Typically, scanning technologies are used where you have to provide a list of assets to a scanning technology. You have to agree on the maintenance window when you're allowed to scan those business applications. You need sign off from the application owner. It can be a little bit difficult to arrange and organize. And even then, it's only a snapshot at a point in time of what the server thinks it's capable of. Now, we all know how TLS negotiates. It is generally driven by the server, but what we offer is, with our friends at Crypto Cyber, is the continual scanning of actually what encryption and cryptography is being used in real time across the enterprise. We do that by listening to the network. We do that using API integration into existing platforms, tools, and agents. We also have our own scanning technology and the ability to integrate with existing scanning technologies. And it's only with all of these different pillars, all of these different techniques, are you able to get a true picture of what's going on. And I would say that the scanning and the understanding via passive network detection of actually what is occurring is absolutely key, because that's your proof, that's your benchmark, that's your true understanding of the reality. We then have to have the ability to undertake some form of cryptographic inventorying, so we understand exactly which assets we have and which cryptographic capabilities are associated with those assets, including things like integrating with CMDB or other, ITAM type systems. We also need to be able to apply rules and regulatory frameworks against the traffic for specific network groups and business applications, so we can get alerting from that. This is also all things that we offer. We need to be able to create insights against simple problems like cert duration. That seems like an easy problem to solve, but it seems to catch people out all the time. And it's a basic piece of metadata associated with any TLS transaction. Obviously, we have the control and remediate, which Mark's already touched on, but then the monitoring part, I think, to ensure that the expected state changes are occurring and progress is being made. I think that that piece really brings us back to this sort of process and circular process. So they're all key steps here. Thank you, Mark.
Yeah, and just one last thing on that, change control does an awful lot up front before you implement anything, but assurance is also an essential thing to link back into change control to validate that the ongoing implementation is compliant to that requested change as well. And that's typically a link that's missing in today's networking. So let's move on to a use case. Sorry, Simon.
Just going to say, and if change controls worked flawlessly, then there would be no such thing as configuration drift or infrastructure drift, which absolutely exists. So, this is why continual or continuous, depending on your approach, monitoring is actually really essential.
So what I want to do now is talk a little bit about a real use case from one of our real customers. And this really illustrates all the points we've just spoken about. So configuration drift, change control, and then as well as that, you know, what happens to your legacy implementation when you only really focus on your primary services. So let me share here. This is a global bank. I'm not going to tell you the name because that wouldn't be an appropriate thing to do. They'd recently passed their audit, so they'd got their audit done, got a green stamp there, and a clean report. And on paper, their configurations were aligned with the best practices. But when we applied real-time cryptographic assurance and looked at what's happening on the wire, we found something quite shocking. Now, for those of you that can interpret the picture, you've probably sussed this out already. But for those that haven't, I'll talk you through it. So the key bit here is monitoring TLS versions. And the standards that come from people like NCSC and NIST have got some opinions that they have published around what versions of protocols should be used. Now, we're currently at TLS 1.2 and 1.3 as approved versions. And you might see here that we found TLS 1.0. Now, this was deprecated a very long time ago. And deprecated means don't use it. We've found vulnerabilities and we've moved on and built something better. So what we found was they had a server running TLS 1.0. Now, to illustrate that it's not just about TLS, the certificate exchange and the cipher was negotiated to a position of null, which again is a valid thing you send across this session. We're going to send it in clear text. So the result here is you've got a bank offering a public service that is using a deprecated TLS protocol and has negotiated to send all of that data unencrypted across that session. Now, in anyone's book, that's quite a bad thing. Simon, I know you were involved in some in this particular use case. Is there anything else you would like to?
Yes, I would. There's some great questions coming in as well, which I'd love to touch on too, if that's okay. So, first of all, let's talk about this slide. So, the key point here is this is an organisation like many large enterprise or in financial services that spends hundreds of millions of dollars a year on people, process, and technology to allow them to be compliant with the mandates of the regulations that apply to their industry, to use technology and people to understand what's going on, have insight into threat, into vulnerability. And we saw, inbound connections to private banking infrastructure, i.e. highly sensitive, that were using a really old version of TLS, which absolutely should not be seen in the wild, with the null cipher as suggested by Mark. This was not only surprising to us, it was very surprising to the organization that we were working with. In fact, we found 10 to 12 categories of bad thing during this process. For everything from certificates with 5-year lifetimes, which is way too long. We saw CBC, we saw some ciphers that shouldn't be used. We saw exactly as this example. This was from one location in 1 minute 48 seconds of capture. So this was quite eye-opening for all of us. And actually, shortly after that, as part of the process of using our technology, we were able to help them clean up and keep an eye on configuration drift moving forward, which was very, very well received. Can I answer these questions now, or should I wait till the end? What do you think, Mark?
Can we go to the? Can we wait to the end?
Sure, you can.
We typically take it in the end, so if it fits with your flow, we can just stick to that.
We'll do it in the end, no problem. Thanks.
Cool. So moving on to the next one. One of the outcomes that we now deliver, but in the new joined up partnership, is this. So we've got a risk scenario here where we can look at contextually volumes of incidents, as well as the categorization and the mapping of those incidents to business terms. So this is quite an important thing, because security incidents and events happen at an individual level, but they impact the business at a collective level. So what we're showing here in the heat map on the left is not only can we show a heat map of the individual incident or event, but we can also contextualize that across multiple events as well. So an example of that, you may have 10 yellow, 2 orange events on the heat map, but that would map out to an overall status of a low red. So therefore, it's not just adding 1 and 1 and making 2. It's adding 1 and 1 and 1 and making an accurate answer. Then, in addition to that, we map that across to business value. So, what is your risk? What is your business risk here? So we can create a risk register number for you, but we can also start to apply potential threat impact values in cash terms. The cost of not doing anything or the cost of doing something. Now, yes, they are quite subjective, but we do make that mapping, so you can take this heat map into a boardroom and start to explain in business terms what an aggregate impact of security events and security incidents and events means to your business. So from there, we start to get a much better picture around managing daily activities beyond just having a syslog or a report giving you thousands of incidents and lines per second. That still happens, but what our technology is now doing is pulling that all together, contextualizing that, and then mapping that out into useful business data for you. So why is that important for you to worry about today? Well, I hear a lot, and I've heard it on this channel as well as many other channels, that we don't need to worry because Q-Day is over the horizon. Well, Q-Day is not the start date. Q-Day is the end date for PQC. So what we've got to be doing now is getting ready for Q-Day by making sure we don't have situations like the bank example and many other examples we see across our install base, where we've got weakness happening, not necessarily on the primary services and servers, but across the whole infrastructure that need to be looked at. Because breaches aren't about, I'm breaking directly into your primary service. Breaches are about, I'm getting into your network somehow and I'm going to find the weakest point, dragon's tail typically, and from there I'll land and expand. And what Quantum's all about is I can break in a lot easier because I've got more power. I can break in a lot easier because I've got more intelligence and capability. And if you're leaving soft bellies to be exposed as a threat surface, or windows gaping open in the case of the bank, it's not hard to get in. And once you're in, you can land and expand very, very simply. So Q-Day for us is all about, that's the finish line for post-quantum cryptography readiness programs. So what we need to be doing today is ensuring, to the best of our ability, we have the best deployed key exchanges, the best deployed ciphers, the best deployed certificate environments, and that is being accurately used by every session, every time on the wire. And the way that we do that is through our cryptographic assurance, which is our passive monitoring of traffic on the network. And we roll that up into our platforms, and we deliver that to you as business data, not just cryptographic jargon. For those that want cryptographic jargon, it's certainly there, but most people and most people don't need that. And another big issue that we're addressing here, and back to bridging our gap, is the staffing issue. We're now making cryptographic implementations usable by the NOCs, the SOCs, and your business by giving you the information you need in the context and terms by which you need to read it and receive it. We're not just giving you the jargon. So how do we do that? That really comes down to our user interface. And we've got very simple graphical user interfaces that breaks down the picture of what's happening on the wire. Bottom left, we've seen the fair heat map, and we've gone through that very briefly. But we also give another scaffold that looks at risk assessment, and we will then map that to standards, NIST, NCSC. We also allow you to create your own standard manually. We've created a Venari standard, which is a mashup of our best practices that we've taken from NIST, NCSC, and other standards. And then we've given you an empty scaffold where you can build your own standard and populate that with your own policies and your own requirements. So you will see on our dashboards your policies coming to life. When we see a problem, we'll give you a scaffold breakdown of the analysis, so you can see exactly what's gone wrong, where it's gone wrong, who's involved, and remediations, suggested remediations to resolve that. We also create cryptographic bill of materials from what we see, and that's been significantly enhanced through the additional information we now get shared by the crypto cyber platform, so we can give a very comprehensive view of CBOM. And CBOM is a critical mapping on your journey to PQC readiness, because you've got to map out what you've got and how it's being used. You then need to map that to SBOM, which is your services overlay, because the two need to harmoniously work together. We've spoken briefly about the fair heat map, and then we start off in the bottom right hand corner is actually your root view, which is your root view of our dashboard, where you can see everything, and all of what we've discussed here is literally a click away. So it's a click and drill. Simon, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Yes, I would actually. Thank you, Mark. So we're in the process of integrating the Venari Security and crypto cyber platform. So a lot of these screenshots are as of today, not future plans, but they're available today. What we haven't spoken about, I'll just reel through a few things. So first of all, we have API inbound and push as well, so we can allow integration with existing enterprise services or systems to allow searching across all of the sessions that we've seen against, cryptographic standards or user groups or business applications and so on. For example, show me everywhere you've seen this cert hash in the past 2 weeks. Show me the servers that are accepting TLS 1.1 or lower in the last 4 hours, and so on and so on. So there's lots of options there for integration. We also do a push of what we call insights. Insights are a set of rules that we provide out of the box, which you can add to, which include the normal checks that you might want to do around things like cert length, protocol versions, known vulnerabilities, cipher suites, and so on. That's kind of slightly separate from the regulatory framework part, and there's also an internal compliance part that you can apply as well to your different groups and areas. CBOM is a more recent addition to our feature list. We are dynamically creating CBOMs from the passive network analysis of TLS traffic that we see. So that means that you can export a CBOM which represents all of your different assets. We have a lot of plans in that area as well to enhance that. There's two approaches to CBOM. Obviously you can do the code analysis of a repo, or you can go from the other angle, which we're doing, which is from actually listening to what is out there. We will, with Crypto Cyber, be able to offer both approaches as well. I think this actually is a good point for me to answer the questions, considering we only have really one more.
I've got one more thing. Okay.
If that's okay with you, Mark?
Yeah, go with that. And there's one more slide after this.
Yeah, it's the yes, yeah, absolutely. So someone asked, with traditional cryptography, compliance needs a private key. What's the term replaced within quantum computing? For TLS, and I'm sure I don't need to share this, but TLS is really a combination of asymmetric and symmetric encryption. So the asymmetric part is what you use to derive the keys, or sort of symmetric keys that's used for the bulk data exchange. There are techniques to mitigate against quantum or cryptographically relevant quantum computing for the symmetric key, which is Grover's algorithm, if I remember correctly. So that can be with a large enough symmetric key, that's okay. The first part, we have a bunch of ciphers and algorithms, at least, that are being ratified at the moment, and the process of that has been going on for a while. I think NIST recently released their newest update. We're able to track the use of those through their IANA registration IDs already. So I hope that answers that question. So basically, there's a lot of overlaps with certs as well. You get this concept of hybrid certificates too, which are kind of both at the same time. And as this moves, as technology and standards evolve to get everyone on the same page around new ways of ensuring cryptographic assurance, obviously the Venari platform will be keeping up with and maybe even slightly ahead of that in terms of the ability to report on it. So whilst Q-Day might be the finish line, the next race starts immediately afterwards, right? And it's ongoing. The next question is, do your scanning tools incorporate open source AI? And if so, are you monitoring data consumption post-scan? We do use LLM to offer guided reporting and prioritization of desired actions. So you can click on in a variety of areas around our UI. You can click on a little button and get an analysis, which we spent a lot of time on the context, the prompt generation and the RAG to ensure that the answers are really insightful. And that really helps to understand how to prioritize the list of violations and insights that we provide. We're also thinking of some great new features using that kind of technique as well. We're using private LLMs for that at the moment, or private instances of LLMs as well. The next question is, part of the scanning process, do you use deep packet inspection, and are there rules classification modules? We don't use deep packet inspection because the payload's encrypted, which we discard because we aren't interested in that. It's encrypted. We're not doing any traffic analysis or pattern analysis on payload, but we are on the metadata. And we have a way of expressing the sort of components of cryptography as almost like a language. So we have a parser and a linter for that, which we use to create rules, which we can then apply to the traffic. So there is a lot of sort of static classifiers. We also have some ML as well. The majority of the simple things are really caught by the static classifiers as well. And I think I spoke about the CBOM already, which was the last question. So if there are any more questions, please feel free to ask.
So just to round out, let me leave you with this thought. Whether you like it or not, you're already on the PQC journey. Q-Day is not the start, it's the deadline. Compliance frameworks already demand strong encryption practices today. Regulations are tightening and the transition to PQC is coming. The only way to be ready is to act now. If you'd like to discuss how we can help, please, and help you gain visibility and control, let's connect. You've got our details, and thank you very much for listening. Anna, back to you. I think we've overrun a little bit, 4 minutes. I apologise.
That's okay. I've got some questions. I think Anna's got loads of questions.
No, I don't have lots of questions, but I have thank you. I wanted to say thank you for your presentation. I think it was also really nice to see, because we recently also had crypto cyber, and I think it's good to see all those tools where they actually really come together. We've been discussing that, like, one thing is that like different tools are coming out, and it's not every time clear where one is complementing the other. And I hope that this time, when we just been discussing crypto cyber recently, and now Venari and crypto cyber, seeing it where it actually complements each other, it really is a powerful lesson, I think, for all of us. Yeah, I don't know if anyone has some technical questions. Then you have experts right here. Then you can speak up. You don't have to write it in a chat.
I'll start in the absence. So
Steve.
Mark, so could you, what's actually driving? Okay, we understand the technology. We understand what you can do. What's driving people to actually adopt this? Because you're both picking up pretty chunky customers at a high growth rate. So what's actually driving that? What's the customer demand that's driving that? What's the customer dynamics?
So let me take that one, Simon.
Sure.
Great question there, Steve. Thank you. The key bit here is the gap between assurance and compliance. And as much as people are seeing that they have got their audits in hand, they are also seeing that there's weaknesses on the wire coming from often services they've forgotten about or don't focus on in a really strong way. We know from a threat perspective that we've got an awful lot of stories about threats coming in the back door. You know, there's brute force attacking on on primary services aren't necessarily the primary goal anymore. Yeah, as much as people will try and do that, a lot of the breaches are happening on that what I call the dragon's tail. So, you know, if you haven't got the same level of focus across all of your estate, Simon's example earlier was I think I might was a customer saying I think I might have somewhere between 20 and 24,000 servers, you know. So, you know, every server and every service needs to have all of the focus and all of the policies applied, and none of the tools historically have ever been built to do that. Because of the approach that we've taken, which is a passive view of the network, and we see everything that passes us by, we see that extra 4,000 as well as the 20 that's on the top of the list, and it's that gap that we're closing, because that's the exposed belly and the weak part that is being broken. And we see examples. You know, Target years ago was a perfect example of an extension of that thinking, which was Target had a significant breach, and it wasn't a direct breach, it was a breach in their supply chain. And the supply chain, it was their air conditioning maintenance company that got breached. And then once they were breached, the hacker then took a secure channel that was approved and was using good strong cryptography that was allowing them access to the Target maintenance platforms that they were looking after, which is how they got in. So what we're doing here is traditional devices, your firewalls, your IDS, your IDPs didn't pick that up at all, because it came from what was thought to be a secure partner, but we would see that on the wire. We pick that up because we see every session as discrete sessions. We don't sit there and go, oh, that's a trusted B2B connection where we don't need to worry about that. Audits also don't worry about that either. So again, there's some gaps here, and the only way to close the gap is you look at the wire. What is happening on the wire? Because that's the only truth that tells you everything. Simon, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
No, I think you got it there, to be honest. It is interesting. There seems to be a groundswell of activity around this. We're seeing, you're seeing new roles being created at companies to try and start to head up some of these larger projects to seek assurance. And if you think about it, this is an enormous amount of work. This change will touch every asset, every component, every process used by every company. In some cases, the small companies, this will be handled by Microsoft updating their standards, for example. But sorry, right.
Simon, so from a direction, sorry, mate. So from a direction perspective, is it sort of heading down? Are we heading down the route of cryptographic observability, so these executives can sort of know that they're not going to get caught out?
I don't see how you could not have that, given the scope and scale of some of the projects to sort of migrate to this new, this new secure way of doing things. How can you have a program to ensure that you're gaining assurance in this area if you can't measure it? I mean, I feel that's a really fundamental requirement. Equally, it's an even more fundamental requirement to understand what you currently have in order to plan a migration or a change. So yeah, I think that's really an essential part of the toolkit. Now, there are existing technologies that do a little bit of this, some of this. There are static, server scanning tools, which are very popular. But again, that's only for that snapshot in time. You need to be sure that all of your transactions are as expected.
And do you think that from a business perspective, that's because the executives that weren't personally responsible were okay with compliance, but now that they are personally responsible, they want to have compliance and assurance?
I think that's certainly a driver. I also think that it was just, we have been blind to this problem.
I think the bigger issue, Steve, is the historic tools that have been available never gave you that insight.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, I understand. All right. Sorry, I'm just conscious of the time. So
just to add one more thing to that. Historically, GDPR never existed. So there was never a regulation that said you can't defend yourself with ignorance. You have to know now, and you have to provide evidence to support your claims to the way that you've protected data. And that is a new manifestation over the past few years.
You've got some questions on the chat.
We'll get loads of questions.
Yes, good. There are two. I think two new questions. One was, are you familiar with the toothbrush breach as an IoT phone attack?
I will be in 2 seconds when Google helps me. No, not really, but that's really interesting. So IoT is another really fascinating area, and OT as well as a separate thing. In OT, encryption is not as widely used in some of the newer protocols, but newer protocol in OT is 5 years old. Whereas IoT, it's very easy to get IoT devices with inbuilt TLS capabilities, but not post-quantum. So there's a bunch of vulnerabilities that you find in IoT. I don't know about the toothbrush one specifically, but I will be reading about it after this meeting.
So in IoT, Simon, so let's say I'm a CISO and I've got, I don't know, could be a toothbrush, could be transport, logistics, or it could be tanks. Let's say, for example, it's tanks. How do I assure the cryptographic security of those tanks? What's the solution there?
Well, again, you need to have something doing monitoring of the actual real ciphers, protocols, versions that are happening.
Yeah,
it starts with that for me. I mean,
so on the question of, with the emergence of PQC algorithms such as Kyber and dilithium, our approach here is, because we're a passive observer, and we compare what we observe to standards like NIST and NCSC as just a couple of examples. What we can look, we don't get stuck on either side of the fence here. We see it all. And what we can do is in the way that we report out with our bill of materials, with our reporting and our alerting, we can map out where the ciphers have been deployed, whether they be pre or post quantum. We can look at the threat surface that any new quantum capability has and has been identified with by NIST, and then give you a report of what exposure and threat surface you have within your install base, because we've got that overarching view in real time of what the install base looks like.
So I have a question for you, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
So over here in UAE, I'm actually carrying out a small proof of concept migration strategy to PQC for a client of ours. Are you able to advise on such strategies for migration? Hard question, right? So I'm not talking about a bank. I'm talking about at the governmental level. So it's a little bit different. So encryption still needs to be very, very high for the government sector.
So the way we work is we follow the standards, and we go by this. We don't create our own standards. So we are very much guided by the likes of NIST as one example. Our recommendation is the only start point is visibility. So you need to be able to map out your infrastructure to give you the as is view. What we do with the platform already is start to give you insights and that guidance and advice through those insights to say, you know, we've found this, it's TLS 1.2, but you've got an old certificate and it's calling a weak cipher, or it's calling a cipher that is not classed as weak by NIST, but it might be classed as unacceptable in the policy of the bank. And we can define that as in the filters of the platform. So really, to answer your question, you deploy our technology, and it gives you that insight and that education by default. And we've built it that way to give you that insight as its default outcome, because we know the legacy tools of yesterday and of today don't work that way. They give you a syslog of jargon that you need a PhD in data science and cryptography to unpick, and you never give contextual views of multiple incidents because you're too busy finding one. So that's the value that we've built into the platform to give you the outcome that means I don't need to teach you all that, because the platform gives you that as its outcome.
So one of the questions we have, which is what we're working at the moment, is we've done a posture analysis across the network, the application stack, and we understand really well how the infrastructure is set up. What we want to do is go from, say, a certain thread on the network infrastructure. Say we want to go to PQC compliant.
Yeah.
We want to understand what is the risk for the organization just during that transition period for that small part, and then also what is the mitigation strategy when it doesn't work in an operational environment. So we're not taking the whole infrastructure, we're taking a small section of it, just do a proof of concept and see what is the risk, one from an operational perspective, also from a cost perspective as well. So many of the organizations don't know how much they actually going to cost. And what is NIST standard? What is NIST not saying that you're going to be compliant? They're just saying this is advice to you in terms of algorithms to use. So I want to know what is the best algorithm, when to use it, and what does that transition period look like. So I'm looking at a 5-year period. I actually want to be a small test for the next 3 years and say I can prove it works in this case here, and then the strategy for the next 5 years is still there.
And we will.
Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense, and it's a journey that everybody's on, and for us, we most definitely help you on that journey, and we do that through real-time visibility. So we don't take snapshots like you would do normally on an audit or a compliance test. We give you the real-time view, and we give you the real-time analysis on that view. So literally, going back to the comment on change control earlier, we make a change control. We're going to deprecate this cipher. We're going to introduce this new one, you can see that in real time on the wire as an implementation. As such, the FAIR heat map then gets updated in real time and gives you that aggregated analytical view of your overall estate. So you don't even need to do this as a small test case. You can do it live on the network and use filters to call out your subset, but still take the whole network view, because as much as you may be reducing you may have a threat surface on your subset, you may have an entirely different threat surface on your legacy rest of the network. We'll tell you that too.
Well,
that makes a lot of sense.
Sorry, I've got one more question. Thanks for that. Theoretically, or obviously, this might be a bit sort of left of field, but is it possible then to go onto an airframe with a Raspberry Pi and conduct a cryptographic audit? Is it possible to go to a manufacturing plant and with a Raspberry Pi and conduct a cryptographic audit?
The answer is yes, but not necessarily with a Raspberry Pi.
Sure. Yeah, I get it. Okay, that's
so
all.
The scanning tools will actually work on a Raspberry Pi, but the live kind of metadata extraction and analysis needs something a little bit more beefy than that.
Yeah, no, I get it. I get it. All right, Anna, I'll pass over to you.
Thanks.
Well, any other questions? I mean, you guys took over the whole meeting anyway, so we might just continue if there is more questions. I mean,
sorry, Anna.
I actually was exchanging the message with that I love it. I mean, that is also the purpose that we create space, that it's not just a lecture, because I think there's enough of those. There you go, Will, go on.
Sure. Well, this is in support of Mark Slater and Simon. I attended a 2 full day PQC conference that was in Austin. I attended it on the web. So it was a full 16 hours. It was very, very intense. And there were a couple of things that happened. On the 16th, it was on the 15th and 16th of January. On the 16th of January in the morning, one of the last executive orders that President Biden signed was to underscore the urgency of kicking it into gear and getting PQC projects started sooner than later, because Americans, I don't know how you guys do it in Europe, but Americans are terrible with procrastination. There were many people that waited 90 days or less to do their Y2K conversions. And so basically he was saying, look, this is a huge urgency thing, and the standards are going to get going to get approved by NIST. And so you need to kick your PQC projects off now and kick them into high gear, because you cannot wait till 2035. 2035 was the deadline that everybody was talking about. He was saying, no, if you can get it done by 2031, do it. And so that underscored the urgency of the conference. The other thing is, my age is showing, I know, but I was in those Y2K projects, and I could tell you from that what I learned in that 2-day conference, PQC is at least 10 times more complicated and larger than the Y2K project. So it's not something people can take lightly.
No, I appreciate that, Bill, and I think I too was in that era of Y2K and before. But what I think my learning since joining the team here at Venari is, this isn't about picking what one cipher is going to save the day for tomorrow. This is about changing the way in which you use TLS, which is a very static implementation based upon whatever server vendor you've deployed, an OS you've deployed on that server, to put an agile process in place where you can choose what you want to do, when you want to do it, to suit your business. And if that changes, have the agility to implement that change quickly and easily within your control. That for me is what PQC is all about. It's not about, you know, this one new key exchange mechanism or this one new cipher is going to come and change the world and it will be like that for another 50 years. That's not it. This is about moving from a very rigid and static vendor supplied cryptographic implementation to a customer owned implementation that is agile and adaptable to their needs. And what we do is you give you that visibility while you move from that static to agile world. And then we give you the visibility once the agile world is in place to show you where you are at any one time, right the way down to individual services. And I'm a firm believer that we are going to move from a very monolithic cryptographic model that we use today to an absolute dynamic one moving forward, because not every session needs the same encryption anymore. We're already exploring monolithic ways of delivering different cryptographic models and support. We're, you know, as we move forward, I have to believe this is going to be more driven by the application demanding a cryptographic type based upon the content it's trying to exchange and the application it's using, which is not the way it works today. So what we're talking about here is PQC is driving an agile model that doesn't yet exist or been implemented. Either way, you need discovery and visibility to be able to traverse that safely and then live with it once it's arrived.
Thank you for watching this presentation, and thank you for being a valued member of our community.